Google says deliberate practice isn't a myth. It isn't, but it is filled with myths. But the 10,000 hour rule is a myth. When 10,000 hours of practice won't make you any more of an expert than doing deliberate practice. So are both myths spread by public imagination? Doing 10,000 hours will increase the likelihood that you will get good at something. Just like doing deliberate practice. So practice quantity still counts. However, if you want to be efficient with your time, that's where you want to do effective practice. And deliberate practice is what the science says is more effective practice, depending on what the measures are. But as the first step of deliberate practice is to have an explicit goal, it would be a performance metric, right? Well, just like in the original research, practice focused on improvement leads to improvement. But the practice should be out of their comfort zone. Uncomfortable, but at a desirable difficulty. But the struggle for most coaches seems to be what that challenge zone is. Because each day is different, and as practice goes on, people get fatigued and then it gets harder. Which is why deliberate practice is measured. Often highly structured and not inherently enjoyable, rarely with any immediate reward, and obviously costs money, time, and effort and energy. Well, becoming an expert isn't simple or easy. No, but it could be if the task was simple, easy, or if you've already got transferable skills that you can use. So most people would be experts at picking up objects, but some objects might be harder to pick up than others. Also depending on how they need to pick them up, which is where sport-specific movements would want to be repeated in practice. But not exactly the same. Well, a highly constrained practice will make you really good at that specific behaviour. If the situation changes, that is where the practice would need to change. Exactly, like in more dynamic situations. Football having more variation than like powerlifting. But deliberate practice can be described as solitary sometimes. So for team sports, it will look different than an individual sport. Because other people will add variability to the practice, making it harder to control the difficulty. Novices bringing more variability because they're new. So the coach wouldn't want to add too much more variability because you want to be able to control the desirable difficulty. Deliberate practice being highly constrained, measured, and goal-directed for specific improvement. Improvement on the practice intention. So not always subject or movement specific. Well, a coach could set up a focused session on social skills, not specifically movement or sport specific. Like working with new people, the session goal focused on a communication metric rather than a movement measured metric. The goal changing the measured metric. Exactly. And this could change the difficulty of the task, the length of the task, and it may take longer to develop those skills. They could grow in confidence in like a week, or take a few years. If the goal was to help people communicate with new people to the club or the team, then they could become an expert at communicating with new members of the team. In that context only. Well, expertise is ongoing and developing, and you don't just become an expert and stop. As contexts change and shift, you develop your expertise. It is ongoing. Because the dynamic environment changes the variability and the metrics of what an expert is or might look like. Which is why deliberate practice might not be the best for some people. That's where deliberate play is used. Yes, deliberate play is recommended and preferred by loads of coaches and academics, but often used for novices. More in the sampling years of learning to help novices develop in a safe and fun environment, moving between deliberate play and deliberate practice. The coach changing according to the needs of the person, which is where adding variability, using more random practice can be more helpful. It is less constrained, so less deliberate, but it doesn't mean it's less effective, and in some cases it can actually be more effective. But for novices, well, even those with high levels of expertise, because it allows individuals to explore other solutions, exposing them to different problems. The solutions they find during deliberate play might be able to be applied in practice and deliberate practice sessions later on. Blocked practice still seems to match deliberate practice more than random practice. True, but any goal-specific, constrained practice with an intention could be classed as deliberate practice. So what is the definition of deliberate practice? Well, that depends on the academic and the coach that you ask. Well, deliberate practice can't really be a myth then. Well, traditional discussions talk about the 10,000 hour rule to become an expert. Yeah, that's a myth. If taken literally, but the same could be said about needing deliberate practice to become an expert. But that isn't a myth. Broadly speaking, no, but there are loads of myths that come from the practice design, like only one solution, an ideal movement solution, there's only like one right way. Exactly, taking the highly constrained part of deliberate practice a little bit too far. What are the myths of practice design then? Well, they could be in the hundreds because practice design is built from an individual's coaching philosophy. So as long as practice is intentional, it will lead to expertise. Most of the time, but as with all learning science, it depends. Yeah, of course, it always depends.